Well, it's happened again. The UK government has banned journalists from entering the country because they committed the thought crime of criticising extremist Islam. That's right, the nation that gave the world the Magna Carta is dead. Pamela Geller and Robert Spencer were set to lay flowers at the scene of Lee Rigby's death. That, of course, was the soldier murdered in Woolwich by Islamic extremists who tried to cut off his head, before they were set to give a speech at an EDL rally. And what precise thought crime did Geller and Spencer commit that got them barred from the UK? Well, they expressed an opinion which is actually shared by innumerable extremist Muslim preachers who are allowed to enter and live in the UK, that the religion of Islam mandates warfare against unbelievers. Now, whether you believe that interpretation of Islam is true or not, it's Geller and Spencer's free speech right to voice it, just as it's anybody's free speech right to be critical of Judaism or Zionism, and just as it's the free speech right of Muslims living in the UK to protest at military parades, or even, as you see in this picture, to call for Islam to dominate the world, and for freedom to go to hell. I don't agree with that, but it's their right to say it. Because we're not living under Sharia law where being critical of or even drawing cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad is met with rioting and death threats. But it seems the UK government wants to move us closer to that kind of society by framing criticism of extremist Islam as a thought crime to be frowned upon. A government spokesman said individuals whose presence is not conducive to the public good could be excluded by the Home Secretary. So it's not conducive to the public good to allow two bloggers to lay flowers and give a speech at a political event that's critical of extremist Islam. Yet the government is simultaneously preparing to send heavy arms to Islamic extremists in Syria who, like the Woolwich terrorists in London, routinely commit atrocities, including beheadings, in the name of extremist Islam. Is it conducive to the public good to use our tax money to arm terrorists? And listen to Home Affairs Committee Chairman Keith Vaz pat himself on the back for helping to crush free speech with this ban. Quote, "I welcome the Home Secretary's ban on Pamela Geller and Robert Spencer from entering the country. This is the right decision. The UK should never become a stage for inflammatory speakers who promote hate." So let's talk about hate, shall we? The UK has been and continues to be home to innumerable Muslim preachers who spout hate on a daily basis, some of them even being on the payroll of MI5, yet they're left alone, while people like Geller and Spencer are treated as thought criminals simply for drawing attention to genuine hate being spewed by Islamic radicals. Take this guy, for example, Anjem Chowdhury. He says that all homosexuals should be stoned to death. He praised the 9/11 terrorists as, quote, magnificent martyrs. This is a guy who scoops up £25,000 in state benefits every year. The government gives him money to preach hate. How about Abu Qatada, the European head of Al-Qaeda, the spiritual leader of the 9/11 hijackers? He's been preaching hate from the UK for over a decade, yet efforts to deport him have consistently been stymied. These people engage in hate, even terrorism, yet are not only left alone, but in some cases even protected by the British establishment. Why is that? As the Times reported, Britain's very own security service, MI5, has helped Qatada, this hate preacher, escape from the clutches of the law. Why do hate crime charges only seem to be made against those who criticise people like Chowdhury and Qatada, who themselves are free to engage in hate speech with wanton abandon? And while these preachers, these Islamic extremists, continue to preach hate and get away with it, even be protected by the government, the UK is also beset by this problem of Muslim rape gangs who like to abduct and pimp out teenage white girls. You know, maybe it's a hate crime to criticise that now. Is it a hate crime to criticise Muslims who vandalise war memorials in Britain with messages proclaiming, quote, Islam will dominate the world, Osama bin Laden? The perpetrator of this graffiti walked free from court after the offence was not classified as a hate crime. So let me get this straight. If you warn against extremist Islam taking over the world, you're engaging in hate speech, and your freedom of mobility, your freedom of speech is crushed. But if you promote Islam taking over the world as a good thing, then that's perfectly acceptable in the United Kingdom. So I guess it's also now a hate crime in the UK to criticise extremist Muslims who put up signs and patrol entire areas of London, declaring them to be Sharia law zones, where any infidels caught engaging in sins such as drinking alcohol, playing music, being gay, or wearing the wrong clothing is intimidated by these gangs of Sharia law Muslims and forced to leave the area. Is it a hate crime to criticise that? You know, it's perfectly acceptable for people to put on plays about Jesus being a homosexual, and that's fine. That's free speech. That's even encouraged. But God forbid should you dare to question what's in the Quran and they don't even let you in the country. Double standard. The principle of free speech is a universal right. It trumps all religions. If you don't like that, go and live in Saudi Arabia. Go and live in Somalia or some other extremist hellhole where women are treated as slaves and homosexuals are stoned to death. If that's the kind of thing you're into, then go and live there. Don't do it in my country. And again, exposing how the left preaches tolerance while themselves being completely intolerant of anyone who disagrees with them. Leftist group Hope Not Hate said they were, quote, delighted with the decision to ban the two bloggers, once again underscoring how the left is completely authoritarian and hates any form of free speech that dissents against their political dogma. Why are liberals defending a religion, or at least the extremist interpretation of it by a minority, that would actually have leftists killed or at least imprisoned for the very opinions they hold? But it's important to stress, and this is key, that the majority of Muslims are completely peaceful and do not embrace extremist ideals, just as the majority of Christians are peaceful and don't embrace the extremist wing of their religion. But within all religions, there is an extremist minority. But our governments are exploiting the threat posed by Islamic extremists to crush personal freedoms for everyone. Jews, Christians, Muslims, Sikhs, atheists, everyone. In Syria, our governments are using the Islamic extremists, the Al-Qaeda terrorists they control, to achieve regime change in order to further NATO and US military-industrial complex hegemony. While domestically, the UK government is acting in a manner detrimental to free speech, while fostering race hatred and ethnic tensions, which have now led to extremists on the other side of the equation targeting mosques with homemade bombs. So why does the state continue to foster these ethnic tensions in Britain and in other European countries? Well, in the UK, they're merely continuing from where the previous Labour government left off. Under Labour, a policy of mass uncontrolled immigration was deliberately enacted as part of a huge social engineering programme, a politically motivated attempt by ministers to radically change the country and, quote, rub the right's nose in diversity. Why are they fostering this race hatred, these ethnic tensions? Well, it's about balkanisation, creating a diluted society based on the admitted failed system of multiculturalism, splintered communities that have little in common with each other culturally, can barely speak the same language, and who are manipulated to despise one another based on contrived racial, religious and cultural schisms. Which of course makes it all the easier for the state to engage in divide and conquer. This is the key point. They want to keep us all downtrodden, dependent, at each other's throats in terms of race, creed, ethnicity, culture, bickering with each other instead of realizing our true common enemy, a state that spies on us, uses our tax money to fight bullshit wars which then only create more terrorists, more ethnic tension, while eviscerating our freedoms at home. That's why the UK government continues to encourage Islamic extremism while punishing those who speak out against it. This is Paul Joseph Watson reporting for Infowars.com.